Welcome to Six in the Six. Tonight's fabulous guest, Mo Ordnung. Did I get that right?
That was a great pronunciation. Yeah.
Hey, I kind of pride myself on getting names right because that's a pet peeve of mine.
Well, it was well done. Honestly, I'm impressed. I don't know if anybody's nailed it that well the first try. People usually drop the first N and then they just say dung, and it's kind of funny.
It didn't go out, it didn't go without some consternation on my behalf trying to figure it out. For people watching, Mo is the associate head coach for Ithaca, the Ithaca College Bombers, with kind of a specialty in goalies, which is how you got here. Oddly enough, I was perusing some championship production videos and watching a great video you made, champion goalkeeping progressions or something to that effect. Happened to mention it to Marissa Kocher that you reminded me of her and you knew her and she knew you and you knew Julie Munson and small world.
Yes. Yep. That's how it happened. I actually watched your video with Munson just the other day to prepare myself a little bit.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I think she had just been hired, or she hadn't been there very long.
Yeah, and it's actually partially Jules' fault that I'm working with field hockey goalies right now. So it's
Amazing.
all good. The one common piece of feedback I got regarding you was that you are a great coach and a better human. So I'm looking forward to this chat.
Oh, that's lovely.
So tell us a little bit, very focused on the goalies. You were a goalie yourself at ESU, which we'll get into a little bit. How did your journey into being a shot stopper begin?
Well, for most goalkeepers, it's that they didn't want to run, but that wasn't the case for me. I wanted to be the player on the field that very clearly was giving it their all. And it happened to be the position where, like, you're asked to dive, you're asked to throw your body around. And that was really appealing to me. So I wanted to be that person that was doing whatever it took and, had the ability to just lay it out there. And the rules applied a little bit less to the goalkeepers, I found. So that was my draw initially to being a goalie.
It seems like a lot of goalies I talked to or people that played goal either got into it, you mentioned, because of perhaps a little easing on the fitness side of things, or they kind of were the last ones to everyone else stepped back when a coach was looking for a volunteer, or they were a little bit crazy, maybe had older siblings who chucked things at them. So the fitness part wasn't it. Were you just like a diving contact kind of want to make an impact person, or did you get abused as a younger sibling?
No, I'm the older sibling that was throwing things at my younger brother. Um, so no, I just wanted to make an impact. I actually think we had a surplus of goalies when I tried out for field hockey. So our school didn't have any field hockey programming until seventh grade. So up until that point, I played soccer, played on the field and as a goalkeeper. So it's soccer. Goal is much bigger. You're very much expected to dive. And then coming in seventh grade, playing the sport that none of us, we were all trying for the first time as seventh graders because there was no programming for younger athletes in Honesdale. So I had a little bit of that diving background already. And since I had that, none of the other goalies that were trying out for the team had been goalies before that. So I had a little bit more of an edge there, just something that kind of set me apart. But they weren't making cuts. So it wasn't like I was trying to necessarily even outplay them. It was just like, this is my strength. I'm going to be the one that's diving all over the place. And I heard for a lot of, especially the beginning of my career, please stay on your feet, please stand. A goalie is better if they can be mobile. So it actually took a while to get me to learn how to be more influential while staying up and being that type of goalie. So that was actually the harder part for me.
How did you feel from like a size relational standpoint of a soccer goal and a field hockey goal? Obviously, you strap some equipment on as a field hockey goal. That's still a reasonably large goal to defend, especially if you're comparing it to let's say ice hockey. How did you find, with taking diving out of that equation, how did you find defending that soccer goal kind of helped you be more successful in front of the field hockey net?
Yeah. Um, it was interesting because depending on the style of game, I remember talking to my dad once I got a couple years in. During the games, I would talk to him and ask if I needed to have more of a soccer mentality, if I needed to have more of a field hockey mentality, just depending on how well the other team was able to change their angle of attack. So while I didn't need to, being able to dive allowed me to then, I was able to put together, be more mobile. So I could be upright and I could go attack one side of the cage and probably come out a little further than the average goalkeeper. But then, no, I used to defend a goal that was much bigger. So I knew I could dive not just the length of the goal, the field hockey goal, but even further. So I was able to add more mobility into my play, knowing I could utilize dives potentially more to my advantage than the opposing players were expecting. I'm also really short, so the goals still seem pretty big for field hockey for me as well, but it was nice that I could jump and touch the crossbar.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, and tell me if you agree, I feel like maybe with that experience in defending that soccer goal and your mobility, like you were mentioning, maybe you were able to exercise a little more patience in that in front of the field hockey goal, which, maybe gave you some better options in terms of what save technique will I choose based on I gave myself an extra half second here.
I'd love to agree with you, but I don't think patience was something I had at the time. I think I saw it as, yes, I can go out and I can try this. And if it doesn't work, I have the ability to be mobile and get back and try something else again. So more so gave me multiple options to try at once rather than waiting, I suppose.
Yeah, I feel that maybe that's the other side. Maybe that's the other side of that coin of patience, that you could be a little more aggressive because you were able to get back in time.
Yes, I think I would call myself at the time extremely aggressive. I've toned down over the years, and now I would say I'm actually a very patient person, but when I put the helmet on, not so much.
So that's an interesting thing for me, because I know as a coach myself, one of the things I don't mind seeing in a goalie or an athlete in general is too much aggressiveness. And I don't mean from the standpoint of going out and hurting people necessarily, but I feel it's easier to rein somebody in than it is to kind of pump them full of, get them to be more aggressive. Would you agree with that? And then how do you teach that patience to them?
Yeah, I think it's interesting depending on the person and understanding why somebody who's more hesitant is hesitant. Is it because they don't have the ability to anticipate what's going to happen next? Are they fearful of potentially the skill and the execution, or potentially hurting themselves? Some goalies don't like going to the ground for that uncomfortable reason. Or are they just so worried about making a proactive mistake that they stay back? So I think when you have a goalie that isn't overly aggressive, getting to the bottom of why they like to stay home is super important. And I teach um, my keepers a lot about what cues and what sort of things they're looking for to understand how the play is going to develop, so that way they can mentally be more proactive. And I think that's worked pretty well. I have a long ongoing argument with one of my goalies at Ithaca, who's a senior, so she's done now, that she says cues don't exist. And I love she says cues don't exist. It's a feeling in your belly. And that's how she knows when to go or not. But she couldn't ever tell me why. And one of my favorite practices, something happened and she looked at me and she went, I know I'm going to regret saying this, but what was the cue for me to go there? I was like, haha. But yes, it's a constant argument that we have, is that bridging the knowledge and education that you have with the tuition that you have as a goalkeeper and knowing when to make those decisions and why, and when you're just playing kind of in a flow state. And my thought is that you educate and you talk things through. And when you talk these things through, you're talking about different cues that are happening, but also your preferred style, your goalkeeper's individual strengths and weaknesses. And then when you do that well enough, yeah, in the games, stop thinking and just use that gut feeling. But I think you have to put in the work first, usually.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you said that, and I think maybe, I mean, you threw flow into there, and I think maybe with a more experienced goalie like the one you're talking about, is maybe we've processed those cues so much that it's become, I don't want to call it muscle memory, observational memory. So we're not necessarily knowing their cues, and we think we're just reacting based on our gut.
Right. But you've had to have seen it enough times and probably failed enough times to know what works and what doesn't work, and been successful enough times to know what works and what doesn't work. But yeah, getting to that point is really important. So I really enjoy building practices that have a lot of common passing patterns or positional placement of attackers that we typically tend to see. So that way they're getting that experience and those memories. And when I have a goalie that tells me, I don't know, I just did it, I count that as a win.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with the patterns, and maybe throwing in some variability up in front of them to kind of add some of what do you want to call it, cognitive distortion, to
Yeah.
kind of make them think about things a little bit, maybe read those cues. The other interesting thing you said earlier on was, style of play. Am I more aggressive? Am I more of a stay-at-home kind of goalie? And then how do I interpret what I'm seeing in front of me, those cues? Because I think, from at least for me, from a coaching standpoint, when I'm working with my goalies, I like to ask them, what did you see? Why did you do that? With trying to understand, with the style they play, why did they make that decision? Did they misread what was in front of them and do the correct action? Or did they read something incorrectly and do the correct action? So it's different thing for us to work on, but it's kind of back to your failing and going through those reps and how do we set those up. Hey, we'll get into that a little more of like how we let them figure that out. But how do you feel about that?
Um, I giggle because I think it comes down to, again, I'm picturing talking to my keepers and some of the ones that I've had in the past. So I used to have this one who told me that cues aren't real, it's a gut feeling. And I know if I asked her, she probably wouldn't know. Or it would take some time and thought to get her to be able to go back and remember what actually happened. And then I have another goalie who would remember exactly what happened. It would say, but what if this happened, or if I tried this, or, and then she has the Rolodex of all the things that could have happened and it didn't happen, or the other things she could have done. And so, and I coached both of those goalies at the same time for a year where it was just the two of them. And that was, it ended up being a really great balance. One person to analyze and kind of pick apart the situation, and another one to say, and it's time to move on.
How, from a mindset, from a like a performance mindset standpoint in coaching those two goalies, did you find that gut feel goalie didn't like ruminate, like over processed maybe goals that went in and stuff, as opposed to the Rolodex goalie who was like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that? And how did you balance those two different mindsets to make kind of a good, mutually beneficial goalie world?
Yeah, I mean, it worked out really well that when we would have conversations during practice or post game, it led us to a really good balance, because you're right. The gut feeling goalie, or her superpower is things didn't bother her. She was able to move on from a play. And I think that is a superpower for goalkeepers, to be able to say, well, that didn't work, I will get it next time. Where my other keeper could really get stuck in a loop of what I should have done or what I could have done and how it could have gone, and knowing that she had the talent, especially if it was a decision that was wrong as opposed to a skill execution, that would really bother her. So being able to talk to them and just have practices where we could hit what was the cue, what was right or wrong about the timing, what was right or wrong about the skill choice. Okay, great. And we're on to the next thing. They were also really competitive with each other, but also for each other. Honestly, the balance between the two of them just was one of the most fun atmospheres that I've had in goalkeeping.
Yeah, that sounds like a great, I'd love to balance those one on each hand and play that out. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
So maybe I was looking up a couple of the goalies you've worked with over at your time at IC. And oh, by the way, I think in the past 8 years, you've been on 3 coaching staffs of the year there. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
So maybe gut feeling and Rolodex is one of these. You've had a chance to work with Macy Brandwine and Savannah Lender over the last half dozen years or so. How how were those goalies? How were those two young ladies similar in their traits and tendencies, and how were they different? And how did those traits help them be successful?
Yeah. Oh, I love talking about my goalies. Yeah, so Macy, so let's see, we're talking about Macy, who I'm sure came up because she was an All-American fairly recently, and Savannah Lenker did really well for us. And while we're at it, let's throw in Katie Lass because she was my first goalie, and she also now coaches at William Smith, who's knocked us out of the playoffs for the last 2 years running. But yeah, so um I got really lucky in the recruiting process that Lass was there when I arrived, and Savannah wanted to come to Ithaca, and so did Macy. I didn't have to fight too hard. We had programs and just things that they were looking for, so that was great. But being able to work um with them, especially as a young coach, was a lot of fun because they were all incredibly different from each other, and also very, very willing to learn. And what I think was great about the relationship that I had with all 3 of them is that we were all willing to learn from each other. They were willing to accept mistakes from me. They were willing to talk things through. And my favorite thing to do as a coach is I don't love saying it has to be done one way or another. I like talking about, circumstances, situations, but more importantly, strengths and, what you feel like your gut feeling is for that situation. And all 3 of them were really good at having conversation and being able to work things through. And if I didn't know what the answer was, and sometimes I didn't, we were willing to try out different things and practice until we got it right, or we found a solution that was right for them. And sometimes the solution that was right for Macy wasn't the thing that was right for Savannah, and that was okay. And I think some of them came from coaching that it wasn't quite like that. They were told to do it one way or the other, and they kind of forced their style around that, where I really enjoyed finding what their strengths were and teaching them how to use their strength to their benefit.
Yeah, you are speaking my language, Mo. I say it all the time that I'm not trying to develop, create robots.
Yep.
We're all physically different, we're all mentally different, we move different, and it kind of actually irritates me when I hear people saying you have to do it this way. I mean, at the end of the day, what's our job? Keep the ball out of the net. I don't necessarily care how you do it. I want you to do it in the most efficient way you can do it.
Mhm.
So I love that. And I love that interactive environment with you showing some vulnerability, like, hey, I say it a lot too. I am not the keeper of all goalie knowledge. I'm the old guy standing over here trying to help you. You're the one in cage actually trying to stop the shots. What did you see? How is this drill going for you? A lot of times I'll stop drills and say, hey, Mo, how would you make this better? What's not working for you right now? And work through it with them, kind of what you said. Get that investment in their own development.
Yeah, definitely. If they have control, and are presented with, problem solving opportunities rather than solutions all the time, that when you hit the game, because you're never going to have the same thing happen in a game, you're going to have situations that look similar. And like I said before, there's going to be cues, but there's going to be something slightly different. The speed of the ball, an extra attacker, sometimes an extra defender becomes wildly confusing. So if we're teaching them what the solution is rather than how to solve the problem, once the formula, once the situation gets slightly changed, they're not gonna be able to put the pieces together. So that's what I hope I'm doing, is helping them build those problem solving skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I say it a lot too. Once the shot's done, you'll never see another one just like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of variables, but there's 1,000 more that are why that shot will never be the same. Back to cues.
Yeah.
What does it look like and what do I think's going to happen?
Yeah.
So interesting. When you guys, when you were at IC, transitioned from Empire 8 to the Liberty League. And I think there were probably some challenges in that transition from an entire team perspective. When it came down to the goalies, were there anything specifically you had to prep them for, or anything differently you looked at for them during that transition?
Um, Honestly, not wildly. There was so much going on. So that year that we transferred from the Empire 8 to the Liberty League was also the year that Tracy Houck retired and Coach Wahila was hired. So we had that as well. We had gotten a new field that year, so the playing surface was different. And um and goalkeeping wise that year, trying to remember where we were at. We had Savannah and then probably Maddie and Ari at the time. Who would have been two goalkeeping first years. So the only steady at that point for goalkeeping was that Savannah had been there for a year and I had only been on the team for 2 years. So with as much chaos, honestly, the change in conference didn't play much into my thoughts, although it probably should have. We were starting to play more teams that had Astro, so we, again, change in surface. The Liberty League had some more highly ranked national teams that were ranked higher nationally, so getting prepared for them was different. But there was just so much going on at the time that I wasn't thinking about the opponent quite as much as I probably would be at this point in my career.
It's interesting. I didn't really think too much about surfaces until I started working with the field hockey goalies.
Yeah.
In soccer, it comes into play a little bit on how the ball moves. Lacrosse, not so much. Um, I feel like I would have to make my practice plans a little more robust to deal with, well, we might be playing on surface A as opposed to surface B. Did you find yourself having to switch up some training techniques based on a new surface?
Yeah, definitely. So we didn't have to change much with the new field because we went from one field turf to another. It was just brand new though, so it was a little bit slow. But when we prepare for the Astro games, yeah, we do a lot of preparation for the surface. We're really lucky that Cornell, you can see it from Ithaca College. So we have a really good relationship with Cornell University and the field hockey staff. So we go over there and we practice on their Astro before we play an Astro game. And there are specific things that sometimes with the goalies will work on. And just the speed is so much faster that usually the first time we're over there, I spend a large amount of time just ripping balls as hard as I can because they have to prepare for that. And also, it's usually a little bit bouncier, so that they have to be prepared for that as well. And then depending on who we're playing, a lot of times the style of play is just a little bit different on Astros. Corners are typically different for Astro. You have more ability to do plays with deflections and like bump passes on Astro. So I'll get the goalies ready to see those types of things as well.
I don't know a lot about the Cortland Ithaca relationship, but I think that's the first healthy Cortica relationship I've heard about.
Well, Cortland would be different. Cornell is where we go over. So
Oh, Cornell, my bad. I got,
no, that's
see,
okay.
oh, it's late. So here's the interesting thing that goes back to your soccer days. I just thought of, you were talking about um, bouncier receipts, bouncier shots in. I feel like one of the strengths from your soccer days in diving may have been the ability to get up quicker. Have you been able to, I mean, was that knowledge from you it used anyway with these goalies and you know and dealing with flatter balls, bouncier balls? It's like, hey, go down, just get up quicker.
Um, so it's funny you bring that up because teaching the art of getting up is something that I actually really enjoy, which is kind of funny because it's like incredibly like small and technical and I've met a lot of keepers that don't really put any thought into it and just get up however they get up. But to your point that you mentioned earlier, I believe that efficiency is key and practicing the movements that might not be the same from goalie to goalie, but you should have a plan for how you're getting up that is best for you. And most of the time it doesn't stray too much from what I think is probably best for them. But yeah, as far as bouncy ball and whatnot, yeah, when you're getting up, I think it's incredibly key to be prepared for, rebounds to be elevated and that we need to be getting up quickly, but we need to be getting up with vision and we need to be getting up with the ability to make a save with at least one of our hands as we're finding a way to get up. Yeah, strangely enough, I could talk about getting up for quite some time.
Oh, I agree because back to your point of just get up however you get up. It's how many shots come in as you're unbalanced, unathletic, and either your elbows are tucked too much or you're completely unable to even react to a shot that would have been pretty easy normally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they don't always think about that.
No.
I'm just going to get up with all those pads and stuff. Um, so you talked about some better teams with Liberty. I'm going to go back to your playing days. Um, at ESU, you were on some pretty successful ESU teams, and you had a pretty standout career there, as I saw, including like female scholar athlete of the year when you were a senior in
Mhm.
mathematics. That's pretty impressive to be the scholar athlete of the year in mathematics. Um, so yay for that. Smart
Thank
goalies.
you. Thank you.
I think you went to the NCAA tournament your sophomore and junior year, if I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
Um, so it seemed, and ESU obviously is a very strong program right now. You must have to be a proud alumni.
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
it seems like that thread of excellence was in back at least in your sophomore, junior year. I'm sure it went further back than that and strings all the way through until, even last year, they weren't as successful as 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, like, what threads of excellence do you see in that program that you've been able to pull out and try to instill in your work at Ithaca?
Growth. I think it's incredibly impressive the amount of professional develop that I see their coaching staff. So in Sandy and KO, they are constantly learning. Their students of the game. I know trying to figure out how to nicely say that Sandy's been coaching for several years and people who I've known that have coached for several years often find that they like a certain system or a certain solution and they stick with it, and that is how it is until they no longer see success or potentially forever. I've been very impressed with their ability to be open-minded, to learn from the national team, to go to different conventions and clinics, and to try things and have to try things, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I've just been so impressed throughout the years with what they have done with the game and what they've done tactically, how they've moved players into different positions, and just how they utilize the knowledge of the people around them. Like when I worked their goalkeeping camp, funny story. Or sorry, I worked their summer camp for probably over a decade at this point. I didn't work it last year, unfortunately, because I had too many conflicts, but they told me, they actually helped me get my current job, and they said to repay them, I can just work their camp for forever.
Or
So
forever.
yeah, there wasn't, I should have had them put a timestamp on it, because as a young person, I was like, yeah. But yeah, when I come back and I work that camp, they're constantly talking to coaches that they have on staff, whether it be other Division 2 coaches, Division 3, or somebody from club. But a lot of times in the evening, the coaches will chat, and again, they're always trying to grow their knowledge. So I think that is what has set them apart and why they've been, taking off, especially the last couple of years. Obviously, they didn't win the national championship this year, lost by a goal, but for Kutztown to get their very first national championship in field hockey, you can't really root against that, even as an ESU alum. Sorry, Sandy. Sorry, KO.
For sure. Well,
Um,
good for the growth of the game.
yeah, yeah. And their keeper, Amy Soupy, who's on the team this year, and she was the goalkeeper in that championship game last year. I actually got to work with her when she was really young. Like I got to teach her how to kick a ball. Like she was in the club that I was coaching at. So she was one of the first goalkeepers I coached when I first got out of college. So it's been really great to watch her grow up and, become a part of that program. So that was really special to see happen last year, and then see her become an All-American and, win the national championship. I can't take any credit for it. I haven't coached her in years, but it was just really great to see her, become that senior goalie.
You planted the seed. It gets watered and it grows, but someone had to plant it, right?
Yeah. I mean, she was a prodigy from day one. I remember saying, all right, we're going to try diving. And she did it perfectly. I was like, great, we've done diving.
I I love this topic, and we kind of touched on it in the we're not building robots kind of thing about maybe it's more of an old school mentality as opposed to a new school. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just a learning mentality, but I feel like, especially when we find success as a coach, or maybe even whatever, that we're like, okay, I found the secret. This
Yeah.
is it. And maybe it's it for a year or two. The rest of the world catches up in whatever it is, tactics, techniques, whatever. And all of a sudden you're on your way out because you didn't have a great season. And I think in order for us as coaches to challenge what we know constantly, we have to be really vulnerable. And it goes back to telling the goalies, hey, I don't know everything. What did you think? And if we don't show that vulnerability, that hey, I don't know everything there is, let's talk about it, um how do we expect them to follow us and grow? I always say you can't follow a stop sign. So I think it's really important from a role model standpoint. I think it's really important from their development. Just um hey, let's try this, let's do this. It may not, I know it might not work. Let's be crazy and try it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I got really, really lucky that when Coach Wahila took the job at Ithaca, and I had already been there for 2 years, and that she kept me, and things have been really, really great between the two of us. Honestly, I absolutely love coaching with Caitlin, and that was one of the biggest things that I have learned from her is she's really good at having that balance of, um, she's confident, she's in control, but she's vulnerable and willing to have conversation. And I don't even want to say show weakness. I don't think that's quite the phrase that I'm working for, but um, she's really good at being able to be confident and vulnerable at the same time. And those are the things that I learned from her. And I think when I first started working with her, I probably was kind of like, oh, I found it. Like, this is how you goal keep. And that's unfortunately when I did that video that you watched that I'm like, hadn't had that mindset of, growth and turnover. And I didn't have that foresight as to how things tend to stack and change. So yeah, learning that lesson from her has made me such a better person, but a better coach as well. And yeah, you're completely right. Like, we have to find something that works, but then anticipate, again, see the cues. How are things changing? How are they growing? What can we do to be better? And what can we do to elevate the specific athletes that we have? So I think that's incredibly important for all coaches to be aware of.
How do you, so in an environment where we're more interactive and engaging the athlete more, and this probably isn't as true at the collegiate level, but certainly at the youth or club level, if we're a little more hands off as a coach and a little more guiding and mentoring, how do you balance the feedback of, oh, you're not coaching my kid, you're just letting them do it what they want, as opposed to we're developing their uniqueness? Where do you find the balance in that? How do you deal with that?
Well, fortunately, I haven't had to deal with too many parents with that type of a mindset or anything like that. Um, but I think the way I deal with that with the athletes is most of the time with humor and with the interpersonal relationships. And while they are working, and if I'm a little more hands off, usually those are the moments where our relationships actually get even stronger because it allows room for other things, for potentially humor or, bonding, more conversation, because if they're again doing that problem solving, we're then talking more together rather than me talking at them and them just taking things in. So I really enjoy those moments of, if it looks like we're more hands off, it doesn't actually feel that way because we're connecting in other ways.
Yeah, I kind of like the problem solving piece of that. One of the ways I've kind of tried to help bring out their uniqueness and their problem solving is I love letting them design a practice. It'll be like, hey Mo, what's your number one thing you're struggling with right now?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've got 20 seconds. What's number one? Blah, 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 and they'll tell me, right? And I'll say, okay, what's it look like? Where's it starting from? When's the final action? Set it up for us. Create a drill for all of us to go through that solves your problem for you. Because now they're invested kind of in that, okay,
Yeah.
hold on. And I found that works. It doesn't work so well all the time. And like the first couple times, they're like, what? Well, they do this. No, you got to be more specific. So I find that really helps them kind of think. So I love the way you're talking about kind of giving that space and problem solve, because it really made me think of, I love doing that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. At least once a week, I'll send a text out to the group and ask, is there anything specific that you want to work on? And I'll find a way to incorporate it. Usually it's me, though, finding a way to incorporate it. I'll have to ask them to come up with some more drills on their own. Yeah, I think I could definitely grow my coaching style to make a little bit more room for that. As much as I like them working on their own, I like them to grow. I don't like telling them how everything has to be done. I do like being the creative, tactical minded person that's kind of putting those building blocks together. So I think that could be a space where I give them a little more opportunity.
Have the GoPro running the first time you ask that question, because you'll catch them going, what? What? You'll get some great video.
That's the reason I probably haven't done it is because I'm always like, they make fun of me because one of my catchphrases is "Hi goalies, so we don't have much time," and that's probably why I'm a little less inclined to do that. But you know what? It'll be worth it. So I'll just have to make the time.
Hey, so okay, so you're an associate head coach. So do you have some intel in that you actually will have less time that day? Or are you like the old goalie, like when you weren't have that head coach responsibility, we're like, I don't know, I think we might have 30, but it might be 8.
Oh, no, no. Caitlin and I work really well together. We design pretty much all of practice together all the time. So yes, I always know how much time we have, and I always go over and pretend that I don't hear her when she tells me that it's time to move on.
Oh yeah, it stopped again.
Yeah.
Do you still have an opportunity to strap the pads on? Do you get to alumni games at all? Do you hop into practices at all, or are you kind of aging out of that?
I don't put them on that often. I think I've only played in one alumni game because it's usually like the same weekend as Ithaca's, or it's ESU's is always at the same time that something's going on work related for me. Every now and then I'll put them on, but it's usually to show our attackers what a goalkeeper an opponent's goalkeeper likes to do. So if there's a particularly aggressive goalkeeper, as we discussed, that was something that was how I played. So every now and then I'll strap it on and show them a little bit more of what they might expect, but that usually happens like once a year. Um, Although every now and then to show some technical skill, I'll just put my lowers on and everybody finds it to be just kind of hilarious because it doesn't look as natural on me as it used to.
Yeah, we all have to transition at some point.
Yeah.
I knew that aggressive comment was going to come out of you. I could just see you coming out and taking out attackers.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I had been prepped a little bit more as an athlete on how to uh, tame and be a little more calculated when I was aggressive. We didn't have too many goalie coaches. A lot of times they were a grad assistant that hadn't been a goalie or a teammate that was potentially injured or somebody who had been around. So a lot of the learning was done on my end. So I wish, yeah, I was a little more aggressive than I would teach myself to be these days.
So the kind of transitioning out of that, you said it seems kind of weird to have them on, or at least the lowers on now. Have you found coaching the goalies and coaching the full team as a good replacement for playing? Has your identity switched over? Do you still kind of miss being there? You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, actually, I usually play in one indoor tournament. Honesdale is where I grew up, and we have the Honesdale indoor tournament. It's one of the earlier indoor tournaments that existed. So often I can get back just for that tournament. And I find that I get angry because I just don't move the way I used to. So unfortunately, I do get a lot of enjoyment of doing things well, and I just don't play as well as I did, but I do really enjoy coaching. I think it has replaced a lot of the playing, at least the mental part of making decisions and trying to, win the chess match. But for that competitive, gotta run, gotta dive, gotta do everything I can physically with my body. I play ultimate frisbee now, and that helps.
Okay, you didn't have to dial back the aggression too much probably for that. Just channel it differently.
Yep, just a little different.
Was there ever a time when you were playing that you struggled with your identity as a goalie? And If you did, or if you didn't, like what strategies do you feel you use to pull out of that or keep that away? And have you been able to relay some of that to your current keepers? Especially, I think, I mean, Macy played up to a grad student, right? How could she transition better into the real world? And you know, how did you help navigate that space for yourself and for the goalies you work with?
Ooh, did I struggle with my identity? That's a good question. As a goalie or as a person?
Yeah, yeah, did they meld? Maybe it's the same question.
Um, that's interesting. Because when I found that when I had the helmet and the pads on, um, I was fairly fearless and, would do anything and had a more um dominating, I suppose, persona. And then when I went to go student teach, because I did major in math, but math education, and the helmet wasn't on, I really struggled to have that same mentality. So trying to bring that goalkeeping confidence and a little bit of swagger into my everyday life was something that I tried to do for a little while, and then eventually ended up finding out how to just be more of that, uh, blending that confidence and vulnerability together as an adult has been where I found now that I'm actually very comfortable as a person. But yeah, there was something about putting the helmet on that, now that you mention it, I think there was a little bit of a difference in identity there. And I don't know if it was the goalie or the being on the field, but when I was off the field, I definitely wasn't as confident and wasn't as um, aggressive or anything like that. Um, Now thinking about Macy, because like you mentioned, she played, she used her COVID year, so she was able to play as a grad student. Um, and she's actually still at Ithaca because PT is a 6-year program. So I still get to see her on the daily, which is nice. I think there's something really special about working with grad students that I actually hadn't gotten to do before, just because they've been out of eligibility for what. But with the COVID year, I have been able to work with grad students, and not just goalies, but grad students in general. And I think that year helps them transition and helps their identity. A lot of players that are done on that 4th year, sometimes you see them wanting to come back, or they missed. Unfortunately, we haven't won a Liberty League Conference championship yet, so a lot of them are left, wanting that. And the ones that stayed still didn't get that conference championship, unfortunately, but I think that they were able to leave their careers knowing they had every opportunity, and they grew as people, they pushed their bodies, and I think that they were more ready to close the book and move into adulthood. I think I could have used a grad year to help me transition that a little bit. I didn't want to leave the field. But who knows, I probably never would have. Clearly, I never wanted to leave the field.
Yeah, just in a
Um,
different capacity. I I think that's such a good point, and I didn't really think of it until you just brought it up about that COVID year. And I think maybe in thinking about it quickly, I think maybe part of the thing that helps ease that transition is maybe the gratitude back to the game of being able to play that extra year when they would have been done. And
yeah,
maybe that gratitude with that appreciation and respect helps ease that a little.
yeah, I think it does. And I think you can kind of feel that from those grad students. And the coach player relationship I've found is just, a little bit different with them. I've connected, just that extra year to connect, but with them being more of an adult. Macy and I have stayed very close friends at this point. And I'm all of our grad students have done an excellent job being role models and connecting with the underclassmen, but you do start to see that they are finding a little bit more in common potentially with some of their coaches than some of the first years. So being able to enjoy that type of relationship with the grad students has been a lot of fun. And I think it has helped with them, continue to transition into adulthood and, accept that new identity as somebody who has finished up their sport because, I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, but I've just really enjoyed my relationship with our grad students, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them have been part of the PT program. So they've been here for their grad year and then like one more year after. So they're still around, and it's probably just all of them. I just really enjoy our entire team.
Yeah, I feel that completely. And I think maybe too, and getting into that grad student year, and I don't know if it's a fifth or a sixth or whatever. I think finally your 20 whatever is calling you and adulting's knocking, and you're like, okay, it's time to get a real job.
Yeah.
And something. But I loved what you said earlier about how you had some of those transferable skills from the field into life that some of these athletes are taking with them too. You mentioned confidence and vulnerability that carried over. And what I thought was interesting, we were talking about identity and you were talking about persona. And sometimes I know I've said it and I've heard other people say it. It's like, oh, when you get on the field, what's your persona? Who are you, right? Who are you channeling to be that? And I heard a lot of helmet for you. Were you actually, did you envision yourself being, someone you looked up to or someone you were trying to, I don't want to say emulate because we don't want to copy people, or was it truly like helmet on, like one of those Marvel movies, and you were like, oh, Superwoman, helmet off. Oh, I'm mild-mannered Mo.
I think it was more helmet on, helmet off for the most part, although I will say that probably was driven from my dad without me knowing it. So he played semi-pro football for what was the Scranton Eagles at the time. And he was a football player that just, he put the helmet on and yeah, he was out for blood. He was incredibly intense, but then, took the helmet off and was dad. And he talked to me a lot about dedication and commitment. He actually didn't talk to me much. Well, he talked to me a little bit about being competitive, but those were more so in anecdotes than anything. But, he taught me a lot of lessons about what your character should look like when you are off the field and what your dedication and commitment should look like when people aren't watching. So I think that's kind of, no, now that we're talking about it, I guess he taught me about both sides, helmet on, helmet off, not just the helmet on. Yeah, so it was fun growing up with a dad that was just like super thrilled. It didn't matter that, I was a girl and I wasn't playing football. I was interested in sports. And I remember the first time I ever put on the goalkeeping gear. It was not real goalkeeping gear. It was like a baseball chest protector, an old one at that. Some of the pieces were field hockey, but he took his ice hockey stick and took me to the little league field across the field and just started whipping balls at me. And I will tell you, I didn't see a shot that hard until I was at least a junior in high school. But yeah, so it was, he definitely had a lot to do with the helmet on, helmet off mentality.
I totally understand now our very first comment of you were aggressive, hyper aggressive in net. Helmet on, go time. I got the Mo game face on. Let's go.
Yep.
Mo, I appreciate your time tonight. I want to be respectful of it. I'll end with one question. As you sit here where you are now with your successes and your trials and your tribulations, what would you tell that younger self of you with the half ice hockey, half baseball, half field hockey equipment on, taking shots from your father, what would you tell her right now?
I would definitely tell her to eh, enjoy it, and I think I did very much. Obviously, I couldn't walk away. I tried to go teach, and then I came right back to the field. So I don't think she necessarily would have needed that, but I couldn't not tell her that. But I would remind my younger self that statistics and um, what you see on paper is not how you should define goalkeeping and your career. And there's so much more. And I would have probably told myself to journal and to take more interest. And I think I did at the time, but I wish I had more memories of feelings and emotions, and I definitely have them, but I would have told myself to forget about the stats. Don't even look at it. It's fun when they're good. It's not fun when they're not, and it affects your decision making. I would tell myself to forget about those things and to focus more. I'm going to bring it back to my goalie, but to take more recognition of what you're feeling in your gut and to make decisions more so based on that and the people around you. So yeah, I think that's what I would tell myself.
You ended on a great note. Pay attention to the internal signs of success and ignore the external signs. I
Yeah.
love it. Control your controllables. Um, Great stuff. Mo, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm going to thank Championship Productions for asking you to do a video because we wouldn't have met otherwise. This was great. I could have gone on for hours. We'll have to do it
Yep.
again.
That would be great. I would love to.
Um, Good luck with everything until we talk again. Thanks again. Have a great night.
Thank you so much. You too.